Vera could not handle everything. He was in immense pain and had to deal with people coming in and out of his property on a daily basis. What could I do? They were only children, but that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. But Vera still feared for her life, waiting for the day when they would enter her house to hurt her. Vera Jenkins had lived in Fort Worth, Texas, all her life. The only difference now was that she was alone. Her beloved husband, Bob, had passed away years ago, and Vera had fended for herself. But now, things were getting harder with age, and it didn't help that she had to deal with people invading her and Bob's farm. The farm was affectionately named Harmony Place, because that's exactly what Vera and Bob felt when they first set foot on the property when acquiring it in 1987. It was what they had always wanted, and they couldn't think of a better place to spend their retirement years together. But unfortunately, not everything went as the couple had planned. They never had children, and when Bob passed away, Vera took it upon herself to continue the work they used to do together on the farm. There was a lot to do, and Vera was always up from the time the sun rose in the sky. A few chickens had to be fed, and the cows were to be taken to pasture. It was hard work, but someone had to do it. Vera prided herself on being a strong woman, but now, as she approached 76, she could feel how difficult she was being made to do certain things. He could no longer pursue some of his favorite hobbies, such as gardening and wandering the farm's vast acres of grounds. As a result, his garden was neglected and full of weeds. But she wasn't completely helpless. He could still pick up the lawnmower to cut the grass that grew around the farm. It took him a long time to do everything, but he always managed well. But Vera's knees were not what they used to be, and soon after, she was told to start using a cane. He knew that in the end he would come to that, and he accepted his fate. In the end, the cane helped him and relieved the pressure on his knees as he took a step. But now, Vera was in a bind. With less and less mobility, his farm was going to look worse. At least he managed to walk around his house to get the hose and water the plants. As he stood in the scorching heat of the day, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. He would swear he saw something move in the grass. But when he looked, he had stopped. Maybe it was a fox, he thought. The next day, when Vera was out doing her homework, she saw them. 4 teenagers were walking towards his property. They carried backpacks and wore clothes that looked like they had been worn for days. At first, he thought they were passing by, but then they walked through the door and entered his property. The boys came back every day, going through the fence as if they were the owners of the place. They were never violent or rude, but they didn't ask permission either. Vera wasn't sure what they wanted, but she didn't like it. He tried to ignore them, but it was hard not to notice them as they strolled through his backyard. Vera began to feel more and more restless as the days went by. He tried to convince himself that they were just harmless teenagers, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He decided to call the police, but when he picked up the phone, he hesitated. What if they were just passing through and she had made a fuss about nothing? Vera continued to watch them through the kitchen window. It became an everyday occurrence as they crouched and dived through the tall grass. They looked around, wondering if anyone would see them walking around the estate. They laughed and threw pebbles at each other. They looked like normal children, until Vera saw that one of them was wearing something. His heart pounded as he tried to figure out what exactly he had seen. But the boys had already disappeared. Vera began to worry because she was sure she had seen that one of them was carrying some kind of weapon. It looked long and sharp, and it looked like it might be for stabbing. Vera didn't want to get ahead of herself, But every sore bone in her body told her that these boys were up to something. She needed to think of something because she was alone on the big farm and practically anything could happen to her.
Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story.
He was vulnerable, and his farm was a haven for criminals. After a few days of bed rest, Vera felt especially encouraged and wanted to go out and get some fresh air. He stood on the porch breathing in the fresh air. Then, as he was about to go inside to make himself a cup of tea, he saw something that looked familiar. There, walking boldly through his yard, were those boys again. Vera was fed up. Emboldened, Vera decides to confront the boys when they enter her property. He beckoned them with his cane and walked toward them. "What are you doing here?" he asks them sternly. The boys look surprised, but they don't say anything. They just looked at her expressionlessly. He had caught them. After a moment of silence, one of the boys took the floor. "Sorry, ma'am, we didn't want to scare her. We have been using their yard to play football. We didn't think it was that bad." Vera felt a wave of relief. They were just playing football. She felt silly for getting so upset. Vera thought for a moment before making a decision. "You can use my yard to play football, but only if you ask permission beforehand. I don't want to be surprised like this again." The boys nodded their heads and thanked him, but she could see how they looked at her strangely. Vera immediately put her hand on her belly and walked away. From then on, the boys became regular visitors to his yard. They always asked permission before entering, and Vera even began to enjoy watching them play. But one day, while I was sitting on the porch watching them play, one of the children came running over. "Grandma, will you bring us water, please?" Vera brought them a jug from the fridge. As he ran away, he heard him ask, "By the way, when will the baby be?" Vera could have died of embarrassment, and she immediately saw how the boy apologized when she didn't answer him. Did she really look pregnant? It would be impossible at his age. The belly had grown even larger, and she was beginning to feel a lot of pain. I just wanted it to go away. Why had he left it for so long? I knew I had to make him look at it. Luckily, she had a neighbor who always helped her out. He brought her groceries every month, and in exchange, Vera would give him fresh eggs and milk. Jim was a nice family man. He was also a sheep farmer and was always willing to help her. So when she called him to take her to the doctor, he wasted no time. It was a huge blow for Vera to hear the doctor say the words, "You need surgery." She hadn't expected it all. She thought it was something that would go away on its own. The doctor told her it was a cyst that was growing inside of her for years, and she now had to have the surgery before it got bigger. Vera was devastated that she wouldn't be able to do anything for some time. What would become of her farm? And how would she do her chores? Jim consoled her and assured her that everything would be fine. But Vera wasn't so sure. All she could imagine was her and Bob's farm being in ruins. It was the day of the surgery, and Jim was at her front door at the crack of dawn. He had, of course, offered to take her to the hospital and would then pick her up afterward. Vera took one good look at her and Bob's beloved farm. She would be gone for a week and hoped her farm would still be standing when she got back. Everything went well with the surgery, and Vera was on the road to recovery. She thanked the doctors and nurses who took good care of her and beamed when she saw Jim waiting to wheel her out to his truck. She was so thankful for his help and couldn't wait to finally get home to her own bed. She eagerly asked Jim about her farm and if he did the regular checks like she had asked him to do for her. She was anxious to know if everything was just as she had left it, but Jim seemed very vague when he answered her questions. It was like he didn't want to reveal something to her. What was going on? Had something happened to her farm? When Vera badgered him for more answers, Jim just shrugged it off. Vera became very worried at this point, and her palms started to get sweaty. She thought Jim was a trustworthy family man, but now she wasn't so sure anymore. She had a feeling that something had happened on her farm, and he wasn't giving her the details. When they pulled into the gates of Harmony Place, Vera's eyes grew wide. There in the driveway stood the 4 boys that had been coming to play football in her backyard. What's going on here? What are those boys doing on my property without my permission? Vera was getting hot with anger. She knew something bad had happened, but Jim quickly stopped the car and let her in on what was going on. It turned out that the 4 boys were Jim's sons, and they had been taking care of Harmony Place in her absence. Vera couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her farm looked immaculate, and the cows and chickens were all healthy and grazing. Vera had tears in her eyes as she thanked Jim and his boys for what they had done for her. Jim then promised that his boys would come every 2 weeks to mow the lawns and clean up everywhere along the farm. Vera was overjoyed, but the good deeds didn't stop there for Vera. Jim and his wife Mary hired a special care nurse to look after Vera as she recovered from surgery. Vera was very grateful to have the extra help around the house,